Hi everyone, welcome to another read aloud. So for today we will be reading the Big Orange Splot. Now splot is kind of a funny word, but if we look at the roof of this house, I see that there is a big orange spot. So I think that splot maybe is another word for spot. So let's get started to see if our prediction is correct. And if we look at the back cover, we can find out a little bit more. So on the back cover it says, when Mr. Plumbeam painted his house, the neighbors couldn't believe their eyes. Plumbeam has gone too far, they said. He's popped his cork, flipped his wig, blown his stack, and dropped his stopper. So now let's go ahead and start on page 3. Mr. Plumbeam lived on a street where all the houses were the same. And if we look at the pictures, they are all the same. They all have kind of like a dark green roof. They are all kind of like this red color. They all have 4 windows. They all have the same grass in front. And he liked it that way. So did everybody else on Mr. Plumbeam's street. This is a neat street, they would say. And then one day, a seagull flew over Mr. Plumbeam's house. He was carrying a can of bright orange paint. No one knows why. So he's carrying paint. What do you think is going to happen to his paint? And he dropped the can, no one knows why, right over Mr. Plumbeam's house. So if I go back to the cover, I see that there was this big orange splot on his roof. So I think that it was the seagull who made that happen. Let's see. It made a big orange splot on Mr. Plumbeam's house. Oh, too bad, everybody said. Mr. Plumbeam will have to paint his house again. I suppose I will, said Mr. Plumbeam, but he didn't paint his house right away. He looked at the big orange splot for a long time. Then he went about his business. The neighbors got tired of seeing that big orange splot. Someone said, Mr. Plumbeam, we wish you'd get around to painting your house. Okay, said Mr. Plumbeam. So his neighbors do not like this spot on his house because now that he has a spot on his house, splot, they don't look all the same. He got some blue paint and some white paint, and that night he got busy. He painted at night because it was cooler. When the paint was gone, the roof was blue, the walls were white, and the big orange splot was still there. Then he got some more paint. He got red paint, yellow paint, green paint, and purple paint. In the morning, the other people on the street came out of their houses. Their houses were all the same, but Mr. Plumbeam's house was like a rainbow. It was like a jungle. It was an explosion. There was a big orange spot. And there were little orange splots. There were stripes. There were pictures of elephants and lions and pretty girls and steam shovels. The people said, Mr. Plumbeam has popped his cork, flipped his wig, blown his stack, and dropped his stopper. They went away muttering. That day, Mr. Plumbeam bought carpenter's tool. That night, he built a tower on top of his roof, and he painted a clock on the tower. So now this is what his house looks like. The next day the people said, Plumbeam has gushed his mush, lost his marbles, and slipped his hawser. They decided they would pretend not to notice. That very night, Mr. Plumbeam got a truck full of green things. He planted palm trees, baobabs, thorn bushes, onions, and frangipani. In the morning, he bought a hammock and an alligator. When the other people came out of their houses, they saw Mr. Plumbeam swinging in a hammock between two palm trees. They saw an alligator lying in the grass. Mr. Plumbeam was drinking lemonade. So now, not only is his house different, but look, his front yard is also different as well. The other houses don't have any plants or flowers. They also don't have an alligator. And here we see him on his hammock drinking lemonade. Mr. Plumbeam has gone too far. This used to be a neat street. Plumbeam, what have you done to your house? The people shouted. My house is me and I am in it. My house is where I like to be. And it looks like all my dreams, Mr. Plumbeam said. The people went away. They asked the man who lived next door to Plumbeam to go and have a talk with him. Tell him that we liked it here before he changed his house. Tell him that his house has to be the same as ours, so we can have a neat street. So, none of the neighbors are liking this new house. They want him to change it back to the way it was before. I wonder if he will change it. The man went to see Mr. Plumbeam that evening. They sat under their palm trees drinking lemonade and talking all night long. So, let's see what happened after that talk. So, early the next morning, the man went out to get lumber and rope and nails and paint. When the people came out of their houses, they saw a red and yellow ship next door to the house of Mr. Plumbeam. So the man that went to talk to him to change his house back to normal has now also changed his house. So his looks like a ship. And let's see what the other neighbors think of that. Because now they don't only have one house is different, they have two houses that are different. What have you done to your house? They shouted at the man. My house is me and I am in it. My house is where I like to be and it looks like all my dreams, said the man who had always loved ships. He's just like Plumbeam, the people said. He's got bees in his bonnet, bats in his belfry, and knots in his noodle. Then one by one, they went to see Mr. Plumbeam late at night. They would sit under the palm tree and drink lemonade and talk about their dreams. And whenever anybody visited Mr. Plumbeam's house, the very next day, that person would set about changing his own house to fit his dreams. So what does that mean? So, whoever goes to talk to Mr. Plumbeam, they talk about their dreams, and the next day, their houses are different. They look like their dreams. So now, one house now has an air balloon. Oh, another house now is all completely different. It looks like a beautiful palace. Wow, we now have a castle too that's red and yellow and has some flags. We also have this other pretty house now. So all of these houses, they are different and they look like the dreams of the people who were living in it. Whenever a stranger came to the street of Mr. Plumbeam and his neighbors, the stranger would say, "This is not a neat street." Then all the people would say, "Our street is us and we are it. Our street is where we like to be and it looks like all our dreams." So other people don't think these are neat houses, but Mr. Plumbeam and his neighbors don't care anymore because their houses look like their dreams, and that's what was most important to them at the end. The end. And that was the Big Orange Splot by Daniel Menace Pinkwater. So now I want you to go ahead and think, what would your house look like if it looked like your dreams? So go ahead and answer down in the comments below, and can't wait to see your answers. All right, bye guys.